From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and Akashvani, this is Stumped.
Hello, I'm Alison Mitchell in Birmingham and welcome to Stumped. I'm joined by the ABC's Brett Sprigg in Sydney, and for Akashvani, Charu Sharma is in Bangalore. Now, the 18th edition of the Indian Premier League gets underway on the 22nd of March, and Royal Challengers Bangalore will be hoping 18 is their lucky number. They've never won the tournament and will be hoping the man with the Midas touch will be former England head coach Andy Flower in his second season in charge with them.
Well, I tell you, one thing we have done is we've got a brand new squad. So we retained three players from last year, and it was the big auction, obviously, and it gives everyone a chance to renew their squads, and we've done that. And probably like every team, we look at our squad and think we can do something with this. And we've got some really good balance in our squad. We've got great power in the batting lineup, and real skill and experience in the bowling lineup, which is a little bit of a change for RCB. Usually they prioritize their batting lineup with some big batting stars, and we've shifted that to what we think is a more balanced team this year.
It's going to be fascinating to watch if that combination comes off. But I do want to ask you, of course, about one of your big batting stars, because this is now your second season of working with Virat Kohli. What has it been like working in close conjunction with him, and what's it been like on and off the field?
He's been brilliant to work with. It was great seeing him from up close, in the dressing room, in meetings, in training, in competition. He's a really impressive guy. And I suppose last season was testing for all of us, but particularly for the leadership group, because we had such a bad start to the season. In our first 8 games, we'd lost 7 of them. Luckily, we turned it around. And part of the reason why we turned it around was, that leadership from within the playing group. And Virat was a huge part of that. He was brilliant under pressure. He also evolved his own game as the season wore on, which I thought from a 35, 36-year-old player that had done everything in the game was amazing to witness.
How so exactly did he evolve?
There was an area of our game as a team where we were a little bit slow towards the end and coming out of power play. Particularly, most sides view the overs 7-8 as a little rebuilding period from a batting perspective, and possibly the easiest overs to bowl are at around 7 and 8. Virat took that area of the game on himself and led from the front and started pushing harder in that area of the innings. That gave us a huge advantage in putting the bowlers under pressure at that time, shifting the momentum of the batting innings, shifting the balance of power between the batters and the bowlers. And he led in that regard. And when he leads, other people follow. He's an inspirational guy. So that's one example of how he evolved his game, and he was excellent in a number of ways. He's a great role model for the way people train. They can watch and learn him how he trains. He's still extremely hungry. He's brilliant in the field. He got a couple of brilliant runouts for us last year, and also listening to him talk in a team huddle, in team meetings, in a batting meeting. He obviously knows the game inside out, and he's an inspirational guy.
And is it no surprise to you the innings that we've seen him play in this Champions Trophy, the 100, but then almost a more impressive sort of 80 odd in the semi-final, off the back of being leading run scorer in the IPL last year?
Yeah, it's no surprise that he's done well in this format particularly. But those conditions in the UAE aren't necessarily that easy, and he'd just come off quite a tough tour of Australia. So he will have bounced back so many times in his career, and he knows his game so well, and it's got so many good fundamentals about his game that's not surprising to see him do well on the biggest stage.
What's the pressure, if not desperation, like Alison mentioned, season 18, no title? How does that hang with you?
RCB is one of the bigger franchises in world sport, let alone just cricket or just IPL cricket. And so RCB and its fans should expect success, absolutely. I would view the fact that RCB hasn't won it, not necessarily as a desperate situation or indeed added pressure. It's a great opportunity. It's never been done before. And quite frankly, one of the main reasons Mo and I took on this challenge.
We'll still take your insights there, Andy, even though, as you say, you are removed these days from that setup. But Jos Buttler having moved on as captain, there's a few names floated around for that next role. Their vice-captain, Harry Brook, one of your guys at RCB, Liam Livingstone, Sam Curran, Sam Billings. Who do you think would be a good option for England?
That in-depth knowledge of what's going on in your squad is really important. So I've come across Harry Brook, for instance, at under-19 level, worked with him a little. And got to know him a bit. He seems like a smart young cricketer. He's got experience captaining England under-19, and he did it well, and it didn't seem to affect his batting very much. So I would imagine he's a strong candidate. They will be concerned about perhaps the burdens of captaincy affecting his form, because he's such an important player and such an exciting player with a bat. I would be surprised if they brought in someone outside to captain. That was done back in the days of Cowdery coming in and captaining the England Test team. I don't think that really happens these days, and I wouldn't think that's a brilliant idea. I think selecting your best squad, your best 11, and there will be leaders within that 11, no doubt. I think that makes more sense.
I'll ask you about my mob then. We're talking about Steve Smith's retirement from the ODI format, at least. And, of course, you've also worked with the Aussie team in recent years as well. What was your favourite thing about working with Steve Smith and your experience in the Australian camp?
I enjoyed talking about the game with him. I thought he was a really interesting guy, very confident. And I thought one trait that really stood out about Steve was he was curious. He enjoyed asking questions himself, and he was bright and curious about the game, and obviously really still very turned on by the game. So I think that curious mind and also a level of humility that around still developing himself, still asking about the game, still looking to better himself and his team and his teammates, I thought really stood out about him. He was a great guy to be around.
I want to ask you as well about Afghanistan, just randomly as well, as you've also done consulting work with them in recent times or a few years ago. Dale Steyn recently backed Afghanistan to win a major ICC trophy within the next decade. How close do you think a team like Afghanistan is to something like that?
I think they'd probably have to play in conditions that suited them for them to have a chance to do that, particularly their batting side. If they came up against really bouncy conditions, or perhaps conditions where the ball moved sideways a bit, they might struggle a little. But if they came up against flat or typically subcontinent type conditions, I think that's a fair shout. They're a hugely talented side. I've got tremendous respect for them. I really enjoyed working with them. I think what they've done over the last decade or so is incredible, to come from such humble beginnings and now to be challenging the best sides in the world regularly, and to be producing players that are pretty special.
Next T20 World Cup will be fascinating for sure, after they did so well in the last one. Of course, we're talking about the Afghanistan men's team because it's well known and well documented that there's no Afghanistan women's team. It's very difficult to talk about one without referencing the other. And Andy, I guess particularly because there were calls in some quarters during this Champions Trophy for boycotts of the England, South Africa and Australia matches. And we featured the women's Afghanistan team in exile quite a bit on Stumped here. Of course, the Taliban have banned women's cricket, but those calls for boycott were really in protest at the Taliban's extreme oppression of women in the country. Speaking to yourself, who famously stood up to a dictator in Robert Mugabe during the 2003 World Cup with the wearing of that black armband to protest the death of democracy, it feels quite pertinent to ask what your perspective is on what cricket could or should be doing faced with this situation as we have it now.
It's a good question and a tough one to answer with any wisdom, really. What I could offer, I guess, is that especially after me experiencing working within the Afghanistan dressing room and watching how much heart and soul and sweat and tears they put into building themselves up to where they are now, it would be really sad to see them not playing, see the men's side not playing international cricket. I think when contemplating things like boycotts, one has to take into account whether it's going to do any good, whether it's going to have an effect. Of course, you can still take a principled stand, even if there is no practical effect. But I think in this instance, if it's not going to change anything in the country, I would be reticent to hurt the cricket team that is bringing so much joy and positivity to a nation that's struggling with all sorts of things, with all sorts of problems. I, of course, sympathize with the situation in the country for half their population, and obviously disagree with the Taliban stance and the way they lead that aspect of their population. And I sympathize with those ladies that are out in Australia, I think mainly in Australia, and exiled from their country and their families and loved ones. And I can't offer a wise solution to it. But talking about it, raising awareness, and then I would imagine trying to influence those through some firmness and forcefulness at the right level, I would imagine would be a sensible place to start.
Andy, it's been a pleasure to have you on, as always. Thank you so much for being with us. Good luck with RCB this season. Thank you very much. Nice to see you guys. Andy Flower, head coach of Royal Challengers at Bangalore in the IPL. Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped. I'll say thanks to Charu, Sharma and to Brett Sprigg, and to all of you for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.